Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Memory Care with Teresa Youngstrom. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And we always are searching for great speakers for you and have succeeded again today in bringing you somebody fabulous to the table. And so without further ado, let me tell you about Jasilika Davidson. So, Jasilika is a devoted child of God, wife, mother, educator, veteran, and advocate with a calling to serve others. Married to her college sweetheart, Kenneth Davidson II, for over 19 years. She's a proud mother of two exceptional children, Claire and Denny. Guided by her faith and deep love for family, Jasilika approaches life with compassion, purpose, and an unwavering desire to make a difference. And she's a graduate of Lander University, Webster University, and Piedmont College. Jasilika's background in education and communication has shaped her unique perspective and skills. Her professional journey has been dynamic, beginning with an on-camera traffic reporter and radio personality before transitioning to teaching. With a teaching license and nearly 6 years of experience, she has nurtured young minds in pre-K through second grade classrooms. Her commitment to service deepened through her time as a veteran in South Carolina with the Army National Guard, where she learned the value of discipline, teamwork, and dedication. But it was her personal journey with her beloved mother, Lena Smith, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that ignited her passion for senior care. Encouraged by a family member to explore this field, Jasilika quickly discovered her calling. She describes her work as a heart work, a labor of love rooted in honoring God and uplifting families, navigating the often overwhelming world of senior care. She also told me about calling this season where she works with people the in between, the phase of life after retirement, but before the need for intensive care. She addresses that gap in planning for the season of life, empowering families and seniors to prepare thoughtfully and compassionately. She was also a speaker for a TED Talk, TEDx KLB. I don't want to miss that. Each day, Jasilika embraces her calling with grace, knowing her work changes lives. Through her dedication, expertise, and faith driven approach, she offers hope, understanding, and solutions for those she serves, proving that even in life's most difficult moments, love and connection can always guide the way. Thank you, Jasilika, for being here with me today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me today, Teresa.
Yeah, I believe I was on your podcast a couple of years ago, which was
I
so fun.
know. I
Yeah, where does
know.
time go,
I-
right?
It goes fast, doesn't
It
it?
really does. It really does. And so tell us about what you're doing now.
Hmm. So, for the last 6 years, God has blessed me tremendously to serve seniors, not just in Central Ohio, even though that is my territory, which means I purchased a franchise. I am responsible for that franchise going out and networking and building relationships with family, but I can place anywhere in the United States. So I help families who are navigating what is called the senior care space. That's what I refer to it as. Now, other people may refer to it as something totally different. But for me, when they are trying to figure out what is the next step for my mom or dad, is it safe for them to remain home? Should we consider memory care if it is a diagnosis of some form of dementia? Are they independent, but they just don't want to worry about maintaining the home? Whatever that looks like, I'm helping them navigate that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important because we need help. And so, what led you to purchase assisted living locators, a franchise? What led you to purchase that?
So that's a great question. I will say that initially I had family members who were telling me all about the senior care space. For whatever reason, they decided to get in it back in South Carolina. Believe it or not, I have about 6 family members who own home care agencies, right?
Wow,
Which is
fun.
kind of crazy. So initially, that was the thought. You're going to do home care. You should start from the bottom. They created their own in South Carolina, a very easy process to do there as compared to Ohio. So they piqued my interest, but I never moved on that, right? Because I tell people all the time, I am a child of God first, I am a wife, and then I am a mother. And it just didn't feel right at the time. Fast forward a couple of years after I moved to Ohio, my family learned that my mommy was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And in that diagnosis, or with that diagnosis, I was a little afraid, if I can be quite honest. I didn't know what to do, how I could help her. I'm in Ohio, whereas my family was in South Carolina. So what kind of help can I be? Uh, what I've learned in my whole life is that my life has been built on service of some kind. Of course, with the Army National Guard and teaching and all those things that I've done in the past. And so I wanted to serve and I wanted to learn more about senior care. Is it something that works for me? Fast forward to 2018, my husband was inbox on LinkedIn,
What?
and it was a franchise recruiter. I didn't know that anything like that existed, Teresa. Like, who is a franchise recruiter?
Yeah.
They're going to take our money, is what I thought. Um, so my husband and I scheduled a time to speak with our recruiter, and I think her name was Lucy. I should know that for sure, but I feel like her name was Lucy. And it was right before Thanksgiving break, right like now. And we had a conversation, and one conversation led to another conversation, which led me to actually be introduced to a couple of different franchise options. Since I have an education background, they introduced me to a tutoring franchise. And then it was something else, marketing, because my background is also communications. And then there was senior care. And it felt right. It felt right. Of course, that's not, even though it felt right, you still have to be interviewed by what was then the founder. Well, she still is the founder of Assisted Living Locators. And I was praying and hoping and praying that this door would open, and it did. And I've been here ever since.
That's incredible. What a great story. Would you say, do you meet most of your families at home because they're planning in advance for this and preparation, or do you meet most of your families that need help, say, coming out of rehab or coming out of the hospital?
Yeah, that's a great question, Teresa. I think it's a mixture. When I say the majority, obviously I have referral partners who are excellent and they trust me and I trust them, and that's what makes a great partnership. So what that looks like is oftentimes, rehabs will reach out to me. Their social workers or case managers will reach out to me, and I will go and meet the families at a skilled nursing facility or at a rehab. And there are instances where an introduction is done by an estate attorney or an elder law attorney, and I am introduced via email, and then I pick up the phone and I have a conversation. Believe it or not, I feel like people don't plan for this, and I did a TED talk, as you mentioned, in the introduction, about that. People don't necessarily plan for this. I don't think in this generation. I think in past generations we have been a sandwich generation where we were, you had someone who was working and you had kids and you have an elder or a senior. And so they didn't know what the cost was and what the preparation looked like. And now that started to change because people are aging and they are living longer than what they lived before. And so with the demands of life, it's no longer something that they can do with all the activities that their children may have or the work demands and just life in general. And so what I've learned is people don't necessarily plan. We should plan so that we're not so overwhelmed with the process, especially the financial piece of that.
Right. You call it the in-between phase, which is so appropriate. So very appropriate. Do you think you work more with, say, the powers of attorney, the adult children who might be the powers of attorney, or are you working more with the spouses of the seniors? Are you working with the seniors themselves?
So typically, I would like to say about 80% of the time, I actually work with the children.
Mhm.
And then 20%, and that might be too great of a percent to be honest with you,
Mhm.
but I'm going to say 20% of the time it's the spouse trying to figure it out. And they really
Right.
want to do their best to keep their loved one in the house for as long as they can. You want to honor that, but at the same time, there comes a point when you realize it's just not safe.
Sure. And do you sometimes recommend they do some private duty in their own home prior to the move?
I absolutely do, depending on what the financial situation is. So
Mhm.
during the discovery process is what I call it, and my colleagues probably call it the same thing. I try to get to know the family and understand what the dynamics are, right?
Mhm.
Understand who's in charge. Is there a POA? Is there a guardian? Sometimes you have a medical POA and then you have a medical PO. It's a whole lot of different parts of the puzzle, right? And then I
Mm-hmm.
have to dig deeper to learn the financial piece. And what if they need 24-hour care and they have limited funds, that's going to run out pretty fast. And so we have to have a heart to heart conversation and understand that even though this is what the desire is, it might not be the best thing, because financially we have to also think about the spouse, if it's something that we're looking at for later on, or maybe they just don't have enough money to even consider an assisted living. And I run into that often, right? Where we have to look at Medicaid options because they just haven't planned for this time in their lives.
Right. Are there
Mhm.
any insurance policies that help folks with this type of housing arrangement?
Yes, long-term care insurance. And I have a colleague that I work with who is amazing that also had me on her podcast to discuss something very similar. And she does offer that, but you don't get the long-term care insurance policy when you're ready to go in assisted living, when you already have some problems, Alzheimer's diagnosis, right? You want to get that earlier off. I would say at about age 50, if you start thinking about it. I know 50 is young.
Mhm.
Back in the day, I think 50 was old, but it's really young
Oh,
now.
no, 50 is very young. Yeah.
It's very young, but I didn't think that 50 was young until I turned, I guess, 48.
And now it's very young.
And now it's very young. Yes.
So typically, are these happy moves or are these not so happy moves? And can you give us some examples of some of the people you've helped move?
Absolutely. I think that when you're thinking about aging, it can be a happy thing and it can be a sad thing. So emotions are everywhere. It's all over the roller coaster. Um, there are instances, oh my goodness, I was just working with this family. Believe it or not, the senior I was working with was 110 years old.
What? What a
110 years
story.
old, and she had been living independently in her home that her husband built
Oh,
all of this time, you know. And the granddaughter, well, I thought she was the granddaughter. She's actually the great granddaughter, but she
makes sense.
called her grandmother or grandma instead of, it's my great great. She never referred to her as the great grandmother. Anyway, so she had been living independently, and I received a call, I guess about 2 months ago. And, you know, my thing is this: I never try to rush a family. I try to put myself in their shoes to understand who they were prior to a change in their mobility or a change in their mind, because they are still people. But I also want to understand what has changed, what kind of help that they need, or maybe the help that they don't think that they need, what's going on in
Yeah.
everyday life, those activities of daily living. We refer to that as ADLs.
Mhm.
And so we were having a heart to heart conversation about whether or not it was the best thing for them to do. Well, in this particular instance, we toured communities. We only toured two because the granddaughter was exhausted, which I can understand. Um, Two communities had the perfect location as far as proximity to family members, as well as they could provide the care that was needed. But grandma just wasn't going to go. And so it was like a tug of war in trying to convince her to actually move. Um, I never got to meet the grandmother because I'm working back and forth with the granddaughter and hoping that I'll get to meet this 110-year-old beauty who has lived a long,
Exactly.
full life. Unfortunately, she passed away last week. She ended
Oh,
up in prior to, because we were like, oh, we're getting ready to move her. We had made the plans. They are doing assessments, all of those things that they're supposed to do prior to moving into an assisted living. And she ended up going to the hospital, and from the hospital to a rehab, and they were expecting her to pass away. um and the granddaughter made the decision to take her home so she could die at
mm,
home,
okay.
and she did, within hours of going back into the house. So it
Wow.
wasn't meant for me to place her,
Mm-mm.
right?
And
I
she
mean,
wanted to die at home
she
too, I
wanted to die
think.
at home. She didn't even want to move into an assisted living. And so
Right.
in situations like that, I know that there's a greater purpose than just placements for me, right? It's that human connection that I love and that I value, because this is a time in one's life where it's overwhelming, it's frustrating, it can be anxiety inducing. It can also be very much fun, right?
Right.
People who are independent and they're like, listen, I've done this thing, this home ownership thing, and I am ready to move into an independent living where they wait on me, they cater to me. And that's a beautiful thing as well. One of the best stories that I've had, though, is a family that I was so blessed to assist them with placing. So, backstory is Huntington's disease. Okay, let's talk
Okay.
about it.
Okay.
Huntington's disease is a terrible, terrible disease that you inherit from a mother or a father. It's a 50% chance that you'll end up with Huntington's disease.
Wow.
Um, if a parent has it. And so unfortunately, two sisters had Huntington's disease. One passed away and the other one I helped place. But Huntington's disease can be very tricky because some people may say that there are behaviors associated with it, right? You kind of hear that with different forms of dementia, that there are some behaviors, and everybody does not know how to love on and support these beauties that are in handsome people, these amazing human beings that are living with this disease. And so I placed her once, and she started having behaviors, what they say are behaviors. And so they didn't have the knowledge or the understanding of the disease to continue to keep her there. She ended up passing, but then later on, I was brought in to actually place a grandmother which was her mother, who had Alzheimer's. And the grandchildren, believe it or not, in their 20s and 30s, had been the caregiver of the grandmother as well as the mother.
Wow.
And that is a lot to have to carry. These girls are beautiful in every way. I stay in contact with them. I've gone to celebrate birthdays. I mean, to know the heart that they have to love on and support their elders is such a gift, while also, just trying to figure out life themselves, have careers and boyfriends and all those things.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like culturally we've moved away from the Waltons, where our seniors would live with the family, until they passed. And it was just part of it. Nowadays, my children, two of the three live out of state, and we move away these days. And so we're not always there to care for our seniors. It's a different time, isn't it?
It is a different time. And I think that sometimes you have guilt for not
Yeah.
being
Oh, yeah.
able to do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And you want to do it. It's not that you don't want to do it. You just can't figure out, especially, a lot of careers now require 40 plus hours per week.
Sure.
You have children, they have activities all in of themselves, right? And then making sure that they're on top of their academics and making sure your mental and physical and emotional health is intact. Those are a lot of things that we have to consider. We have to think about. And we think it's selfish to consider ourselves and not necessarily to primarily focus on our elders. But I kind of go back to what they say all the time when we are getting ready to take flight, and you have the stewardess who tell you, hey, put your mask on first. You can't really serve someone else if you are not taking care of yourself, whatever that looks like. And it's not selfish to want to do that. Most parents that I speak with say, I don't want them to have to worry about this.
Right.
They don't want them to have to.
Right.
They have their lives and they understand that it looks a lot different. And it's great when you do have the buy-in of the senior, right?
Oh, yeah.
That way you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, this is like a tug of war. We're fighting back and forth verbally about whether or not this is a good decision, but I need them to do it because there's no way I can.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say in your organization, once you would get to know my family, and do you give me a couple of options? Do we go look at a couple of places? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I try not to overwhelm families. Once I get, and it can be tricky in the sense that sometimes you have three people, right? Trying to lead the efforts.
Right.
And some people may say, I want my loved one to be in Westerville.
Yeah.
And, and then you have another child who says, I want my mom to be in Dublin or Grove City. And so in instances like that, I have to take it all into consideration. And maybe there are times when I give them more than three. Typically, it's going to be three options based on location preference, budget, and then most importantly, that care, right?
Right.
I don't want to overwhelm them. I want to give them great communities that can serve them. I have to take a lot into account how much they have in their budget, how long it's going to last. Do we need a Medicaid community? So when I say Medicaid, you're paying privately for a short period of time.
Mhm.
And then after that private pay time has been exhausted, the Medicaid waiver is available. But then there comes the education piece of that, right? Because just because they advertise Medicaid, having a Medicaid bed, doesn't necessarily mean that when you're ready, there will be a Medicaid bed.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to do. And it could be that the community can't handle a higher level of acuity. So you end up in a skilled nursing facility anyway.
Right.
There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. And I try to be extremely transparent with my families without making them feel overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
that's a hard task to do because I believe in transparency, being truthful,
Sure.
telling them how it is, telling them what they need to know, and not just what they want to know.
Right.
And so that's hard.
For sure. Do you find that the more popular places have waiting lists?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
I mean, there are a handful that do have waiting lists. But no, for the most part, I feel like, and it's unfortunate to say when you think about the census, but there's no one who's going to live forever. And so
Right.
just as they may have an empty bed today, they may not have one tomorrow, or they may have more. I recently went on a tour at a community and they were letting me know that their census was down, not because they're not an excellent community, but they had a lot of deaths in a
Mhm.
short period of time. People
Mhm.
just took sick. And when situations like that happen, and they do, it's normal, right? We see it in our own families when people
Yep.
are passing away.
Mhm.
Um, you just keep on moving and you keep serving and hoping that the right family is going to come into that community.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Sounds like you're really helping so many families. It's so great. Do you think that, in your experience, do you have a couple move together, or is it typically one person going into community?
I actually have not placed a lot of husband and wives.
Mhm.
Now, most recently I did place a husband and wife. And actually both of them had Alzheimer's, but one could make it out in assisted living without problems, was not exit seeking, whereas the other one could
Mhm.
not, totally different. So she ended up in memory care. And
Gotcha.
that was a concern, right? Nobody wants to hear that, but we needed to do that, but also bring them back together during the times of the day so that the transition is smoother
Good.
and that they're able to still connect regularly.
Right, so they could go have meals together or different times together.
Go to
That's
activities together as well.
that's good, I love that.
Yeah.
You know what? This has gone very quickly. I really want my audience to know how they can connect with you, follow you. I know they can find you on the internet, and you
Mhm.
have a lot of great information to share. So please, before we log off, please tell my audience how they can get in touch with you.
Well, first, Teresa, thank you. Thank you for opening up this platform for me to speak with you and share what I do, what I love. Again, I
Mhm.
call that heart work. Families can reach out to me a couple of different ways. Of course, there is the traditional way of picking up the phone and dialing me, which my mobile number is 614-347-6140. I'm available via text. Some people prefer text initially. And then also the traditional way of just speaking on the phone, voice to voice. I love to go and meet them at their home once they feel comfortable doing that. And since my home is an in-home office, I can also meet them at a location like a Panera or
Mhm.
libraries, a safe location. That's really important to me to make sure that they feel safe. In addition to that, you can find me at Jasilika Davidson at LinkedIn. So it's assisted living locators / West Columbus. If you're online, I'm sure you'll have that somewhere as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Instagram, I am ALL West Columbus. And then on Facebook, it's Assisted Living Locators of West Columbus. And if I could, I would like to say, you talked about the planning piece of it. What I'm learning is that the children who are now trying to take care of their loved ones, this is a really good time to have a conversation about their lives for later on, getting that long-term care insurance that you mentioned. Like, what can you do to protect yourself and protect assets and all the things, right? Of course, a
Right.
law attorney is great. But if you have that long-term care insurance policy as well, it's good to do it now so that your children may not have to worry about the financial piece. Because oftentimes, if mom or dad cannot afford assisted living, and the loved one does not want it to be want them to go straight to a Medicaid community, that they have to financially support their loved one.
Right.
And that could mean, for some families, that's pretty hard. They have vacations, they have a house, they have, a car, they have other responsibilities that are truly something that they have to consider. One family couldn't help because they had a child in private school and then they had a child in college. So
Mm.
what we are tasked to do, I feel like, is in my generation, because my mommy couldn't afford it either, right? If I could be honest,
Yeah.
is that we are tasked to get our own long-term care insurance policy and start having those conversations sooner than later and have it written out what what you want,
Right.
right? What you'd like to see. How long do you want to stay in your home? What if I can't because I do have a diagnosis of some kind, and it doesn't have to be dementia. It could be cancer. It could be a lot of different things,
It
right?
could.
Right. And so having those tough but necessary conversations, I think, is truly important. And I encourage you, families, to do that now. Do it sooner than later. Start
Sure.
talking
Powers of
about it.
attorney too. All of that.
Yes, yes. Write it down so that people know what your wishes are.
Yeah. Boy, that's just excellent, excellent advice. And we all need to hear it because you really need to have the stuff done. Your kids need to know where those papers are.
They do.
Your
They
adult
do.
children need to know
I
tho-
agree.
those things. Absolutely. Well, listen, thanks so much for being here today and sharing all this great information. I'm sure you're going to be getting some calls after this. Well,
Thank you.
yes, so great. So thanks everybody for being here today. I will have some great notes from Jasilika in our show notes. There's so many more great things to tell you about her and what she's doing up there. Thank you for being here. Hey, could you send this to someone? Could you, share it, like it, maybe even become a member? That would be so great to do that. And we can just share it with more and more people. So we appreciate the time. We appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. And again, from Teresa Youngstrom, you got this.